Welcome back to the PFRPA Podcast, and today we have a very special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mike Tice. How you doing, brother?
Brian, I'm doing well, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for spending some time and jumping on the show with us, man.
Oh, man, my pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
So for those who don't know, why don't you give us a quick bio on you? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to high school, college, pros, coaching, all that? Give me a bio.
Okay, real quick. Well, as quick as Mike Tice can be. I grew up in Long Island, New York. I was blessed to have great teammates and great coaches throughout my Little League and high school career. In fact, my high school head coach was Coach George O'Leary, who just retired recently from Central Florida. They put a statue out front of the stadium for him. He was my high school head coach. So I actually was blessed to have great coaches from starting in high school. I attended the University of Maryland on a scholarship, played for Jerry Claiborne. I was actually a quarterback at Maryland.
Get out of here.
Come on. I was a quarterback at Maryland. I started 2 years. We weren't very good. I believe we went 8-3 one year, 7-4. We went to bowl games. I got hurt in the spring game going into my junior season. Hurt my shoulder pretty severely, had a screw put in, still played the next 2 years. I got a free agent tryout in 1981 for the Seattle Seahawks as an athlete. Was about 235, not 305, and they moved me after minicamp when I couldn't reach a couple of receivers on any go routes. They moved me in training camp to tight end. Jack Patera, God rest his soul, was the head coach. He moved me to tight end. I called my dad on like Wednesday and said, "Dad, I'll be home on Friday." He goes, "You guys already have off, Michael?" I said, "No, I'm a tight end, Dad. I'm jersey number 91, and Friday's the first cut, so I'll be home on Friday." So I actually, Brian, got lucky, worked hard, made the team, end up playing for the Seahawks 10 years in total. Chuck Knox was mostly my head coach, a great man, another
Nice.
Great man.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went on and played for the Vikings for Coach Denny Green for a number of years. And when I retired from playing in 95, Denny Green offered me a tight end job. I went right into coaching for Denny Green, worked my way up the ladder. Denny Green left, and I don't know if it was luck or not luck. It was probably bad luck. I became the head coach of the Vikings for a couple of years. So I retired 2 years ago, Brian, from the NFL.
Wow.
I was very blessed to have a 35-year run, 14 as a player, 21 as a coach. I wore a lot of hats. Met a lot of great people, have a lot of great stories, a lot of great friends from my time in the league. Was never a star, was never a Pro Bowler. Was mostly a backup blocking tight end, and I've been very lucky though.
Yeah, it's the brotherhood is something uniquely special, and the fact that you got to be around that long is amazing. Yeah. And I know a lot of guys that would dream of being in a position like that where you can make that last for that long, because we all know for most folks it's just way too short. So
it doesn't happen. Like I said, I've been very blessed, very lucky to have a career that long. And then also my wife, Diane, we went to high school together. We've been together over 40 years. Got married in 1983, have two great kids, Nathan and Adrian. And the great thing about Diane and I is we're best friends and we do everything together.
Oh, that's awesome. That's actually the bigger story here. So you were high school sweethearts, huh?
Yeah, we started dating my senior year in 1977, and
she put up with you for all those years in the NFL.
I think there's something wrong with it, because
oh my gosh,
to put up with Mike Tice is not an easy challenge. You can ask anybody that was a teammate or a coaching partner. I'm a pain in the ass. I mean, I'm tough to deal with. So, but Diane. Yeah, go ahead.
I know. I feel the same way about my wife. Autumn. I don't know how she's lasted this long. I'm just putting up so bad. I'm so stubborn, and you know how we tend to get.
Yes, we tend to get opinionated, and we tend to not listen. I find out since I've been retired, I'm just better off tagging along and going with the flow. I don't know why it took me 40 years to learn that,
Right.
but it did, Brian. It did.
It's much easier going with the flow, man.
Oh,
As you know,
you got
going
that
with the
right.
current. All right, so one of the questions I like to ask guys, to give a little bit more personal picture of your time in the league.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have stories, especially us guys before social media and all that stuff and playing.
Right.
A lot of guys have stories that are the most special NFL moment that they have that nobody else probably saw. And I've talked about one on here a bunch of times about my moment with Reggie White after a game, my rookie year. I survived.
Right,
I survived. I gave up one sack against Reggie. I took that as a victory.
Did you get forklift?
Jumpy?
Yeah.
My Jumpy Gathers?
Yeah,
I
right.
certainly did. Thanks for reminding me.
Oh yeah, you got it, baby.
Dude, Jumpy was a beast, wasn't he?
Yeah,
and it's hard to
teammate of my brother John's down in New Orleans. They were down there in New Orleans together, Jumpy.
And it's hard to explain that move, and nobody else really does it but Jumpy. And it was really all about just absolutely demoralizing the offensive lineman.
Power.
Right? I'm going to pick you up, and I'm going to drop you on the back of your head and make you feel like you can't block anybody.
Well, you said you survived. I had a number of guys I survived over the years, B. A number of guys.
So tell me that one story that when you think back on your NFL career, what is that moment to you that is your most special, treasured moment?
Well, when I was with the Seahawks, Chuck Knox, we had a nice year. His first year, I believe it was '83. We had beaten the Raiders twice. We were in the same conference back then, the same division, if you will. We were in the AFC, the Seahawks. Now they're in the NFC. And we beat them twice during the regular season. We went down to play Miami, who were big favorites against us, double-digit favorites. I would say 14 or so points, and we had no chance to win the game.
Right.
And it was New Year's Eve, and we won the game.
Wow.
Actually had a good block. Kurt Warner scored the winning touchdown. And we rode home on a big 747, and Chuck Knox invited anyone's wife that had gone to the game to ride on the plane back with us, and we had a party and a half. And the fans were waiting at the airport. The Seahawk fans, you know how crazy these Seahawk fans are.
Yeah.
The 12s, if you will. And we went into the airport, and there were thousands of people cheering and waiting for us. After that victory, unfortunately, we played the Raiders for a third time and lost to them in the championship game to go to the Super Bowl. But what a great experience. A young player in his third year playing on New Year's Eve, win a big game against a Don Shula coach team that was supposed to, kick our butts. And that is probably my most treasured moment of my 35-year career in the National Football League.
Wow, that's awesome. It reminds me too of a moment that I was blessed to have too. It was very similar. It was in Jacksonville's second year, that '96 season when we had we had made it all the way to the championship game, but we beat the Bills at Rich Stadium, which was amazing. I'm talking about the Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas Bills, and then going to Mile High and winning at Mile High. I just remember that flight home.
Right?
It was a party.
Isn't it amazing how you remember
the
win? You remember the wins, but a drop pass or a holding call at the wrong time, you tend to forget those things.
Yeah. That's what I tell people. The older I get, the better I get as a player. Right?
I mean, I actually had a guy come up to me a couple of months ago in Seattle and say, "Oh, Coach Tice, man, you were a great tight end. Boy, could you catch?" And I sat there and looked at him and said, "Really? It took me 14 years to catch 110 balls. What do you mean? I was a great receiver." They didn't throw Mike Tice the ball. Someone once said, well, oh, don't you get annoyed that they don't throw you the ball? I said, well, listen, they got Steve Largent, Brian Blades, Charlie Young, the great tight end, was ahead of me. Are you going to throw the ball to Mike Tice? So,
you were that tweener, man. You know, you're not quite a receiver, not quite a lineman. You know.
unfortunately, back then you ran down on punts, you ran down on kickoffs, and you were able to block in short yardage situations, and you carve yourself a little niche, and you don't overprice yourself, and you carve out a 14-year career, and you get lucky.
It's amazing.
I wish I was a little younger and able to make the money these kids are making nowadays. It's amazing.
Boy, it's crazy. Well, guaranteed contracts and all the things that they get now, it's pretty awesome. And to be honest, that's I remember the same conversations taking place when I was playing. Back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and the older guys saying, "Wow, wish we made the money you guys were making," and right. So it goes round and round.
Now that I'm retired, and touching base with a lot of the guys that I played with in the '80s, and circling back around and rekindling friendships and teammates and those type things. There are hundreds of guys, maybe more, that I have run across that don't know anything about the programs. They don't know anything about the physical that they're able to get, the 3-day physical. They don't know anything about the legends, things that they can do, the things that you're doing, the things with the vision that the guys were able to put together, the dental. And one of them is my brother John. I mean, I had lunch with him last year, and he didn't know about a couple of the programs. And then, so I just think, part of the responsibility of some of these, or the NFL legends and the pro retired players and so on and so forth, the alumni, is to really, reach out and try to accommodate more guys. I don't understand why that communication with these billion-dollar industry is lacking.
Well, I think some of it is a little bit generational. Where there's a lot of focus put on social media, but we're dealing with generations of guys that still don't have any kind of social media, right? I'll pick on Dave Robinson here, as I was sitting in a board meeting with him a few months back, and we were talking about this very subject. And folks that don't know Dave was part of the Packers Lombardi era, part of the first Super Bowl championships. He still had one of the old school flip phones. And it was like a brick, too, by the way. Right. And he was like, I'm not on social media, and I'm not, how would I learn about these things? So I think you're right. I think we need to find more creative ways to reach that generation of player,
I
even
agree.
if it's old school mail. And a lot of times, too, there becomes challenges with tracking some of these guys down, too. Unfortunately, some guys that aren't doing well are moving around a lot. At the end of the day, there are a lot of great programs, like the dental and vision plan that the PFRPA has is amazing. And just those simple things like that. And I know that the Legends community and the Player Care Foundation, we're starting to put together something that is really going to start helping guys with that quality of life issue.
Yeah, and the NFL Trust, that program, that's something. If you're not on social media, you're not going to know about many of the events that they put on. They put on a lot of really cool events. I mean, so I hope with my ability now, having the podcast and being on YouTube, I'm certainly talking with Steve Largent and seeing that great article he wrote in the New York Times several months ago about what to do for the pre-93 players. Of course, he was in Congress, great player, Hall of Famer. I tell you, I hope that I can reach out and touch some people and talking about former players and help them get better educated, especially like you said, the flip phone era.
Yeah, right, for sure. That's a personal passion of mine, of course, and one of the reasons why we love doing, these podcasts and hoping that guys are hearing the message, and that people care, and this brotherhood that we share. It is one of the most unique fraternities of all time, and I think it's best experienced when we go to a big event and we go to a Super Bowl, and let's say, or it's a draft, and I meet another player from another era. This is a guy I didn't know from Adam 3 minutes ago. We just met. We know that each other was a player, and there's this instant, unexplainable bond and brotherhood that just happens immediately. It's there are very few people, I think, that go through the, especially in our era, of the difficulties of what it took to play in the NFL. Yeah. The hardship, the training.
Yeah, the hardship, the training, and I went through 2 strikes, 82 and 87, being involved, assistant player rep in 87, being involved in those strikes and those meetings and those negotiations. I remember flying to New York in 87. Like you said, paving the way, the hardships, the different, no off-season program in the beginning. You had to work out and get ready for training camp on your own. No limit to the amount of players they brought to camp. I think my rookie year with Seattle, we talked about that. I think there were either 129 or 139 guys in camp. All of those things, have helped make the NFL in their 100th, they just finished their 100th season, is what it is today.
So you mentioned, let's talk about training camp and the yesteryear of training camp. You had Knox. He was a pretty tough coach. He was known as being that tough, strong-willed coach. What was training camp like for you?
Well, a lot of physicality, a lot of padded practices. There were no, only, one padded practice every, 3 weeks or whatever they do now.
Right.
And so it was padded practices, and it was short yardage and goal line live. And,
man.
And it was a man's game. The big saying always was, differentiate between pain and injury. If you're hurt, you're hurt. If you have some pains, tape an aspirin to it. And
that's right.
That's what they used to say, and that's what the way it used to be.
Are you hurt or are you injured?
Are you hurt or are you injured, right? And so, times have changed. Agents, there's a lot of agents that have gotten involved and helped make things better for players with their demands. The Players Union has done a decent job of negotiating some changes in off-season program and, what you can do, what you can't do. But back in the early days, it was a free-for-all, as I'm sure you've heard from some of the older guys you've interviewed.
Yeah. So you have this great vantage point of the NFL with such a long career, both as a player and a coach. Where do you think the NFL is in 20 years from now? What's the game look like?
Well, I really think the league has to and will continue to harp on player safety. And it's the players, as I just came back from the combine the other day. I was there for a number of days, and the players are bigger. And, you keep hearing that, but it's true. The players are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. The collisions are devastating. You just pray that there's not a collision that's going to end the wrong way. And I think they'll continue to harp on player safety. As far as where I see an issue, and I think they're starting to do a decent job, but I'll be honest with you, I've been trying to get a hold of somebody for about 2 months to run a couple of youth clinics, is that the NFL needs to really do a better job of investing. And I know they're doing some stuff, but I don't see enough in youth football and educating the youth and the high schools on how to play the game safely. I think the problem is you take a guy, and I'm just talking about where I see the NFL going, and I think the safety thing is the biggest thing. They're going to continue to make money. Now you're going to involve sports wagering across the country. It's going to be legal here in Washington State probably this week. It's legal in Indiana, where I just came back from for the combine. The sports wagering is going to be a big thing that's going to change the game in some way. I don't know how it's going to change it, but it's going to change it in some way because people are going to be out there talking about it like it's just you and I
Yeah.
talking about what do you take in your coffee, Brian? You take
Right.
cream or sugar.
Well,
Well, who you betting on this week? I mean, that's going to
right.
be the norm, you know?
Well, certainly they're going to end up extending the seasons. I mean, they're already talking about extending another 2 games. If we're talking about the onset of legal wagering, I mean, let's be honest. That's why we have Monday Night Football. That's how that all started, right? You gambled on high school on Friday, college Saturday, pros run Sunday. Well, let's give one more game for Monday night. I don't think a lot of people knew how much of an influence Vegas had on the creation of Monday Night Football. But now we're playing on Thursdays. So, and you know this as a player and a coach, when you have that turnaround between a Thursday game and a Sunday game, that becomes difficult. You also know that when we have already have a 16-game season, that's a long year. You're not even talking about playoffs yet, and you go and add games to this. They certainly have to diminish the preseason games, you would think, right?
Right. Well, the thing about the preseason games, Brian, is nobody's playing anybody anymore. And you look at some of these teams, and if they don't start the season well, and they start 0-2 or they start 1-2, now their questions come. You can read the articles. You can go on any internet site, website, and read the articles. Is it the slow start because they didn't play Jimmy Brown in the last preseason game, or the last two or so and so running back got one carry in the preseason? Is that why he's off to a slow start? No one's playing anybody anyway, and nobody's watching it, and no one's buying tickets to the game. The people that are at those games are the ones that don't go during the regular season. And, they don't know when to cheer and when not to cheer. They're cheering when the offense is on the field. And so, I think they're going to have to diminish the preseason games to 2 or 1, or even just 1. And you know what you're seeing more of, Brian, now? You're seeing more of these teams getting their work done, practicing against each other in training camp. That's what you're seeing.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time doing that when I was in Jacksonville. Practicing against either the Bucks or Atlanta, and I think that's actually the next evolution where this goes, and that becomes how you judge your cuts.
Right.
Really is off those those combined practices, and then just either make these the real deal games, because I'll tell you what. I just remember, and especially my rookie year, we had 5 preseason games my rookie year. The first one was the Hall of Fame game. And I just remember at the start of the season thinking to myself, I felt like I was halfway through a college season, which was 10 games. And how my body felt, and by the time we ended 5, that was the end of the year, right? And here we are with 11 more games to play, and how I looked at that back then of, just not being ready for that rookie wall, that you're going to smack into inevitably.
Oh, and it's coming. So it's coming too,
right?
That wall is coming.
Yeah, brother, I just remember at the end of that last game, my rookie year. I slept for 3 days straight after our exit meeting. I literally just crashed. I was so exhausted. Oh man, it was crazy. So go. Let's go back and dive back into the Mike Tice archives. And one of the other things that I think is interesting from a player's perspective is to learn of. When did you first know? When did it first dawn on you that you're in the NFL now and it's different? What was that moment? Did you have one?
Yeah, I want to say it was my rookie year. I made the team. I was just in total awe of everything still. Moving from quarterback to tight end, made the team, opened up against Cincinnati on the road. Just the travel aspect of it, the buses, having the motorcade with the police, motorcycles,
right?
The whole pageantry of the NFL and the fans on the road. But where I really realized I was in professional sports, and this is a true story, and I won't say the name of the player. I looked up in the locker room, and there was a player after practice smoking a cigarette in the locker room. And this was 1981. This was 1981. I'm not going to say the name of the player, and it was a great player. And I remember saying to my dad, you're not going to believe this. So-and-so was smoking a cigarette after practice in the locker room. He goes, what? And I said, yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. He goes,
right.
no, are you sure, Michael? Are you sure? I said, Dad, I am positive. And that's when I realized, wow, this is professional sports. This isn't high school or college. I'm 21. These are grown men that I'm in this locker room with. And it was intimidating. It really was.
Yeah. I can't imagine that. I literally, smoking is so frowned upon now.
Oh, yeah.
I just couldn't imagine somebody lighting up in the locker room. What that must have felt like. That's crazy.
Oh, I was in shock. I really was. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but that 81 year, a lot of it was, you're in awe the whole season. You're just out there trying to survive. You're playing a new position. Every day is a new experience. And, you're fortunate enough to be able to make the team and play and contribute, especially on special teams. And, back then I wasn't 300 pounds, so I was able to run a little bit. So, but
the more you can do, though, right?
The more you can do. That's exactly right. I was mad because I wasn't on the punt return team, and I went to the special team coach. I said, why can't I be on the punt return team too? He goes, because you're not quick enough. You're too long. I went, too long? What do you mean? You're too tall. And I was like, oh, okay, I got it. I didn't know it. Too long, man. What is too long?
All right. So to start to wrap this up, we always talk about transition, and you have obviously a unique transition, and you've created one of my favorite sports podcasts called Odds and Ends with Mike Tice. Right. Talk to me about what got the idea to start the podcast. How did that all come to you?
Well, it was my son Nate's idea. Millennial, 30-year-old. They listen to a lot of podcasts. He said, Dad, I wanted to stay engaged in the game. I knew I didn't want to go back, or at least 2 years ago when I retired, I had no determination or inkling to go back and be a full-time coach again. And so I listened to my son. He said, you want to stay engaged in the game, start a podcast. You can start doing interviews. So I did. I set up a little studio that I'm sitting in now, my little man cave, able to run my wife and I, Diane's foundation out of here too. And I started doing interviews, and I'll never forget, my kids were critiquing me. My daughter would text me and say, quit yelling. And so I started out, Brian, with a big horse race guy. Anyone that knows Mike Tice knows that he's big into horse racing, always have been. And so I started out with interviews of friends of mine like Bob Baffert, the Hall of Famer, Mikey Smith, the Hall of Fame rider, Gary Stevens, the Hall of, and started doing last April horse racing leading up to the Kentucky Derby. And I did horse racing the whole summer and the whole spring and part of the summer. And then when football came around, training camp, I called on guys that I had worked with, and I started doing football interviews. And that's how it all started. And I kept critiquing myself. Well, as I'm watching a podcast and as I'm watching your podcast, I'm realizing where I want to be is in the streaming, the YouTube. So about the 6th or 7th week, Brian, of the season, I had my first podcast video with Gary Stevens, the Hall of Fame rider. We Skyped it. It was a mess. I was a little figure up in the right-hand corner. I couldn't figure out how to do the studio view. And then I realized, okay, what I'm going to do, we go back to the sports wagering thing. What I'm going to do is pick 3 games a week. I'm going to pick any, horse. I'll do the Breeders' Cup. And I'm going to pick 3 games a week, and I'm going to start picking the games and doing a little YouTube show, 8 minutes to 5 minutes, whatever. And I started doing that, and I started getting some traction. And the nice thing, B, is I hit my pick of the week 13, including the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I picked 13 weeks in a row. The winner of my pick of the week without losing a game. I did have one push.
Wow.
That was the Seahawks versus Carolina Panthers. And my friend said, God, you did. I'm a horse player. I didn't bet on the games. I don't have a bookie.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I'm picking the games. But I got all these buddies I grew up with in New York, Brian,
Yeah.
retired New York cops and firemen. And they're like thanking me every week. They're like, oh, man, thanks, Mike. Hey, thanks, coach. And I'm like, okay, good. So, but I enjoyed it. And like my son said, he was right, Nate. It kept me engaged in the game. It kept me engaged. It re-engaged me to the National Football League. Just came back from the combine. Was able to set up some interviews. I'm going to start doing some of the draft stuff. I'm going to obviously stick with what I know, the offensive linemen and tight ends. And I'm going to do some draft stuff. I'm working on possibly doing my first live stream podcast, as I mentioned to you in the pre-show, down in Las Vegas, because that's where the draft is. So I'm excited about it. And my wife said, you got 2 years to make some money. And if you don't make some money, sell your damn equipment. So I haven't made any money yet. I was going to get a shirt that said, I do this only for my vices. And so, you know.
There you go.
So,
there you go.
But I might get a T-shirt like that. But I enjoy it. I enjoy watching your podcast. I think I've seen every single one of them. You guys do a great job. But I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. No, this has been great, and actually, your podcast has become my favorite sports podcast. And I will tell you this: I've never been a horse race guy, but I know way more about horses now than I thought I ever would. Now, I will tell you, I'm a cowboy at heart here in Texas, so
right.
I certainly ride horses. But I'm talking about
right.
wagering on horses. I never thought. Yeah. Anyways, now I have this itch to go wager on horses. Thanks, man.
Well, yeah, I don't want to start you on any kind of. You don't need any vices like I got.
Are you kidding me? I've been through way too much to gamble money away.
Okay.
Right.
True. I keep telling my wife, I don't seem to bet as much now that we're on a fixed income.
Exactly. Isn't it funny how that happens?
Isn't that amazing?
Right?
Don't drink the same kind of wine. Don't bet the same amount on the horse. So, but
everything changes.
I appreciate you. And I enjoy
I appreciate. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time, brother. This is awesome. We're going to have to do this again. And folks, and tell folks where they can go to see your podcast.
Well, I
have a website or just YouTube?
I have a YouTube station like everybody else does. It's the Mike Tice channel, but the name of the show is Odds and Ends with Mike Tice. It's also on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Listen in, 2 different shows. Never talk about the wagering aspect of the game on the audio podcast. That's more for information for people for their fantasy football teams. But the YouTube show is the one where I like to pick the games and the horses.
There you go, man. I appreciate